It began with fire. Not the gentle kind that lives in fireplaces and flickers in candles, but the kind that eats. The kind that turns drywall into smoke and memories into ash. The night sky over the small town of Maple Ridge glowed a sick, trembling orange. Sirens screamed through the cold air, bouncing off the sleepy houses and dark pine trees. Neighbors stood on their lawns in pajamas and coats, watching in stunned silence as flames climbed the siding of a little blue house on the corner of Hawthorne and Fifth. On the front lawn, a woman sobbed into her hands. A man in a t-shirt and bare feet coughed smoke, shouting hoarse directions no one could understand. Two kids, wrapped in blankets by a paramedic, clung to each other, their faces streaked with soot and tears. And on the curb, lying very still with an oxygen mask gently pressed over his muzzle, was an old dog. He looked like a German shepherd once, or something close to it, now grayed around the eyes, fur singed in places, paws raw. His chest rose and fell in shallow, determined breath. His tail gave one faint thump when the boy in the blanket stumbled free from the paramedic's grip and dropped to his knees beside him. "Bear," the young man whispered, voice cracking under the weight of years and smoke. "You did it, buddy. You did it." The dog's eyes fluttered open, finding the face of the boy he had met long ago, when the world smelled of disinfectant and loneliness instead of smoke and fear. For a moment, the fire behind them was just a glow, like a memory fading into the distance. For a moment, all that existed was the boy, now grown, and the dog no one had wanted. Years earlier, Maple Ridge had not yet met that kind of night. The town was the kind of place where people still recognized each other's cars, where the grocery store clerk knew who was saving up for braces and who was quietly paying for both their own food and the neighbors'. There was one main street with a diner that never changed its menu, a church that never changed its steeple, and an animal shelter that never seemed to empty, no matter how many adoption days they held. The Maple Ridge Animal Shelter sat on the edge of town, near the railway tracks and under a line of big maples that dropped leaves like slow fireworks every fall. It didn't smell like sadness, not exactly. It smelled like bleach and fur and the faint, hopeful traces of peanut butter from treat. The sadness was quieter than smell, living in the way some dogs didn't rush the front of their kennels anymore when people walked by, having learned that hope hurts when it doesn't land. It was a gray Saturday the first time 8-year-old Noah Harris walked through the doors. He came in holding his mother's hand, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his hair sticking up in the back where a cowlick refused to cooperate with the laws of grooming. The world had recently shifted for Noah. His dad had taken a job 2 states away, just for a while, and the house had become echoey in a way that made sleep harder to catch. His mother, Emily, had started leaving the TV on at night so the silence wouldn't be so loud. "Remember," Emily whispered as they stepped inside, "we're just visiting. We're dropping off blankets from the church, okay? We're not adopting today." "I know," Noah said, but his eyes were already scanning the rows of kennels, wide and searching. The volunteer at the desk, a woman in her 50s named Carla with kind eyes and a ponytail that had seen a lot of long shifts, smiled at them. "You must be the Harises," she said. "Thank you for bringing these." She took the stack of folded blankets from Emily, brushing a bit of lint off the top. "The dogs will love them." Noah drifted toward the kennels as if drawn by gravity. Dogs of all shapes and sizes watched him approach. Some barked, some wagged frantically, some pressed their noses to the bars with desperate, shining eyes. "This is Daisy," Carla said, stopping beside a speckled hound who spun in excited circles. "And this is Rusty. He's been with us a few months. Very sweet boy." Noah nodded, polite but absent. His gaze kept wandering down the row, past the barking and the jumping and the wagging, toward the quieter end of the room. That's where he saw him. In the last kennel, away from the "Adopt Me" banners and colorful beddings, lay a big, rough-coated dog with ears too big for his head and a body that looked like someone had drawn a German shepherd from memory and then smudged the lines. His fur was a mottled mix of tan and black with odd patches of white. One ear stood straight up, the other folded at the tip, as if it had once tried to stand and then changed its mind. A thin scar ran across his muzzle. His bed was plain, worn, no toy, no bright sign. He wasn't at the front of the kennel. He was in the back, lying down, head between his paws, eyes half closed. His tail didn't wag when Noah stopped in front of the bars. He lifted his gaze, just barely, then lowered it again, as if he'd learned that looking too eagerly at people only made it hurt more when they walked away. "Who's this one?" Noah asked, his voice suddenly very small. Carla hesitated. "That's Bear," she said quietly. "We don't show him to many families. He's a little older. Some scars. He's been returned twice." She glanced at the dog with a sadness that had grown familiar. "He's a good boy. Just, nobody picks him. Nobody picks him." The words sat in Noah's chest like a stone. "Can I go in?" he asked. "We usually," Carla began, then stopped. She looked at Bear, then at the boy. Something in the air shifted. "Let's try something," she said. They stepped through the double gate and into the kennel. Emily hovered uncertainly by the entrance. Bear watched them come in, his body still, only his eyes tracking their movement. Up close, Noah could see the wiry texture of his fur, the faint tremble in his paws, the way his ribs showed just enough to hint at a past where food was not always promised. Noah didn't speak at first. He slowly knelt down on the concrete, his jeans scraping the floor. Bear flinched almost imperceptibly, as though bracing for something that didn't come. "It's okay," Noah said softly. "I'm not gonna make you do anything. You can just be there." He didn't reach out. He didn't call the dog's name, didn't pat his leg, didn't whistle. He just sat, hands in his lap, looking at Bear the way you look at a tired friend who doesn't have the energy to talk. Minutes stretched. The hum of lights and the distant barks of other dogs filled the space between them. At some point, Noah's knees started to ache, but he didn't move. Then something small happened. It might as well have been an earthquake. Bear's nose twitched. He lifted his head a fraction, sniffed the air, and took in the scent of boy, grass and pencil shavings and soap and a faint trace of tears from earlier that morning that hadn't fully dried in his heart. The dog's eyes met Noah's fully for the first time. There was no magic glow, no sudden music swelling in the background. Just a look. A long, evaluating, wondering look. The kind you give when you're deciding whether to believe in something again. Slowly, as if pushing through invisible molasses, Bear scooted forward on his belly. He stopped halfway across the kennel, then seemed to make a decision and closed the distance. He lowered himself right in front of Noah and pressed his head, hesitantly, then firmly, against the boy's chest. The impact knocked a tiny breath out of Noah. He laughed, surprised and wet-eyed. His arms moved like they just remembered what they were for and wrapped around Bear's neck. "Hey," Noah whispered into the coarse fur. "Hey, it's okay. I got you." The dog let out a long sigh, the kind that sounds like something leaving the body that had been stuck there for too long. His shoulders softened. His eyes closed. For the first time in a long time, he leaned into someone, trusting that they wouldn't step away. Carla swallowed hard. Emily wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, silently losing the argument she'd been having with herself all morning. "Mom," Noah said, not looking up. "He's the one. I know we said we were just visiting, but he's the one." "Noah," Emily began. The practical side of her brain reminded her of rent and groceries and the space in their small house. But there was her son, hugging a dog no one wanted, and there was a dog who looked like he had just remembered how to exist. Carla stepped closer. "We've had trouble placing him," she admitted. "He's been overlooked so many times. If you're willing to try, I can help with food, training classes, anything you need. He just needs someone." Emily looked down at her son, then at the dog. She thought of the empty chair at the dinner table, of the way Noah had stared too long at doorways lately, waiting for someone who never came through. She thought of how long it had been since she'd seen him hug anything like that. "Okay," she said, the word coming out on a breath that carried both fear and relief. Okay. We'll try. Noah looked up, eyes wide. Really? Really? But you're helping. Walks, feeding, everything. I will, he said immediately. I promise. We'll take care of him. His voice caught. He looked down at Bear. I'll make sure nobody ever doesn't pick you again. Bear leaned a little heavier into him, as if he'd understood something important. They filled out paperwork. They paid a reduced fee. Carla quietly waved a big chunk. They signed their names on lines that made everything official. When they left, Bear hesitated at the threshold, claws clicking on the floor, eyes flicking from the kennels to the doorway like he was afraid it was a trick. Noah tugged gently on the leash. Come on, Bear, he said. Let's go home. The word home hung in the air like a bridge. Bear stepped over it. Life rearranged itself around the new presence in the little blue house on Hawthorne Street. The first few weeks were full of adjustment. Bear paced at night, circling the living room until he finally settled by Noah's bedroom door. He startled at loud noises, the slam of a cupboard, a dropped pan, but never growled. He had a habit of placing himself between Noah and the front window, as if barricading him from something only he could smell. There were accidents on the first couple of days. Chewed shoes. A shredded cushion that apparently looked at him the wrong way. He barked at the mailman with the conviction of someone protecting a fortress. But he learned quickly. He learned the sound of Emily's car pulling in the driveway, the difference between neighbors' footsteps and strangers. He learned that the boy had nightmares sometimes, and that if he pushed the bedroom door open with his nose and put his head on the bed, the boy's breathing would even out again. Noah learned too. He learned how to read the tilt of Bear's ears, the flick of his tail. He learned when a bark meant, I heard something, and when it meant, I'm unsure, and when a quiet stare at the pantry meant, you forgot something important that comes in a bag. He learned that Bear loved peanut butter more than life, hated vacuum cleaners, and barely tolerated baths but would submit to them stoically if Noah sang terribly off-key the whole time. They walked together after school, down the cracked sidewalks of Maple Ridge, through the park with its rusty swings and small pond where ducks made serious business of floating. People who didn't know how to talk to grieving children found it easier to talk to Bear. He's a good dog, they'd say, and Noah would nod, proud, the way other kids might nod about a trophy. At night, when Emily stood in the kitchen washing dishes, she'd hear the murmur of Noah's voice from his room and the soft thump of Bear's tail hitting the floor in response. The house, which had seemed so hollow since her husband left, felt full again, not fixed, not perfect, but warm at the edges. Years passed the way they always do, slowly, then suddenly. Noah grew. His legs stretched, his voice cracked and deepened, his schoolbooks got heavier. He discovered he was good at drawing and bad at algebra. He discovered that some friends stayed and some drifted, that teachers had lives outside of school, that missing a person who chose to leave felt different than missing a person who never had the chance to stay. Through all of it, Bear wove himself into the pattern of their days. He was there for the first day of middle school, trotting anxiously at the end of the driveway as Noah got on the bus. He was there the day Noah came home upset, cheeks flushed, backpack thrown a little too hard into the corner. Kids can be mean, Emily said softly, sitting beside him on the couch. They said my dad didn't want us because he left, Noah muttered, picking at a loose thread. The words tasted like rust. Bear, sensing the storm, jumped up and wedged himself between them, resting his weight against Noah's legs. That's not true, Emily said, the words almost as much for herself as for her son. Adults make mistakes. They leave for reasons that have nothing to do with how much they should love their kid. It hurts, but it doesn't mean you aren't worth staying for. Noah buried his fingers in Bear's fur. Bear stayed, he said quietly. Emily's throat tightened. Yeah, she said. He did. The seasons came and went, painting Maple Ridge in different colors. Summers smelled like cut grass and barbecue smoke. Autumns dressed the town in orange and gold. Winters brought frost that traced delicate ghosts on windows. Springs turned everything wet and green and new. Bear's muzzle slowly turned white. His boundless energy softened into a dignified pace. He no longer sprang up at every squirrel, but his eyes still tracked every movement around Noah with laser focus. He had taken it upon himself to be the boy's shadow, and he took his responsibilities seriously. By the time Noah turned 15, the little blue house on Hawthorne felt less like a place they lived and more like a living thing itself, full of scratches on door frames where Bear had nudged his way in, fur in the corners no vacuum could fully conquer, drawings on the fridge, and a dent in the sofa cushion where Bear insisted on sleeping even though he technically wasn't allowed. On Noah's 15th birthday, the three of them sat around the kitchen table with a slightly lopsided cake Emily had made in a rush after her shift at the diner. Bear sat between them, wearing a ridiculous paper party hat Noah had forced on him, eyes half-lidded in resignation. "Make a wish," Emily said as she lit the candles. Noah looked at the flickering flames. They reminded him of campfires and electricity outages, and the time Bear knocked the scented candle off the coffee table with his tail and nearly gave Emily a heart attack. He closed his eyes. "I wish," he thought, "that we could just stay like this, all three of us, for a long time." He blew out the candles. One stubborn wick glowed for a moment longer, then went dark. "Want some?" he asked Bear, holding up a tiny piece of cake. "No chocolate," Emily warned automatically. "I know." He grinned and broke off a corner of plain cake, offering it. Bear ate it delicately, then licked Noah's fingers clean, tail thumping contentedly. Fires are born long before a match is ever struck. They begin in the small things. A frayed wire, a forgotten candle, a heater running just a little too long against old insulation. The night of the fire on Hawthorne Street started like any other, cool, clear, a slight breeze rattling the last dry leaves in the gutters. Emily worked a late shift at the diner, covering for a sick coworker. The kids, Noah, now 19 and home from community college for the weekend, and his 10-year-old sister Lily, who had arrived years after Bear and completed their family in a way none of them had planned but all of them had needed, were at home, eating pizza and watching a movie. Bear lay near the coffee table, eyes half closed, listening to the familiar rise and fall of their voices. Lily had grown up with him as a constant, a big, patient presence who tolerated dress-up games and tea parties and once spent an entire afternoon with a pink ribbon tied to his tail because she said it made him look fancy. Halfway through the movie, the power flickered. The TV screen went dark for a moment, then came back on. Noah frowned, glancing toward the kitchen. He thought he smelled something, but it was faint, like someone had just blown out a candle in another room. "Did you smell that?" he asked. "Smell what?" Lily said, eyes glued to the screen. He sniffed again. The air seemed normal. He shrugged it off. Later, after Lily went to bed and texted Emily a sleepy, "Good night, Mommy, orange heart," Noah went to his room to finish some homework. His desk lamp cast a warm circle of light over his notebook. Bear followed him as usual, flopping down in the hallway outside the bedroom door, his self-assigned post. He dozed off. So did Noah, eventually, his head resting on his open textbook, pen still in hand. An hour passed. Then another. In the kitchen, behind the wall, a faulty outlet that had been heating up slowly for days finally gave way. Sparks jumped. Old wiring glowed. Dry beams took a breath they hadn't taken in decades and caught fire. At first, it was quiet. A flicker inside the wall. A small, secret heat. Then the heat grew, licking up the studs, cracking the paint, turning wires into dark lines. The smoke detector in the hallway should have gone off, but its battery, long overdue for replacement, sat dead in its plastic case like a soldier off duty. The house began to fill with smoke before anyone woke up. It moved like a patient predator, slipping under doors, curling along ceilings. It crept toward the bedrooms where the people it was about to harm slept unknowingly. Bear woke up. It was not the sound that stirred him, not yet, but the smell. His nose twitched, catching a scent that was wrong. Not the warm, comforting smoke of a fireplace or food. Something harsher, sharper, smoke that meant danger. He lifted his head, sniffing hard. His old joints complained as he pushed himself to his feet. His ears swiveled, listening. Down the hall, through the wall, he heard it, the faint crackle of flames like someone crumpling cellophane steadily. He turned toward Noah's room and nudged the door open with his muzzle. The room was dim. A haze had already started to gather near the ceiling. Noah slept hunched over his desk, oblivious. Bear barked. Once. Sharp. Noah stirred, frowning. What, Bear? What time is it? He muttered groggily. The dog barked again, louder, urgent, then lunged forward and bit the sleeve of Noah's shirt, not hard enough to hurt but hard enough to pull. Hey, what's… Noah lifted his head fully and blinked. His eyes stung. He coughed, confusion clearing just enough to be replaced by alarm. The air tasted wrong. Bitter. He looked up. The haze was thicker now, a thin gray sheet creeping across the ceiling. His chest tightened. Smoke, he whispered. His chair scraped back. Lily. He stumbled into the hallway. The smoke was heavier there. From the far end, near the kitchen, orange light flickered under the crack at the bottom of the door. The fire had already eaten through part of the wall, licking the cabinets, tasting the curtains. It roared low as if gathering its strength. Noah's pulse surged. Lily, he shouted, voice hacking as the smoke clawed his throat. He bolted to his sister's room, Bear right at his heels. He threw the door open and was met with a wave of thicker smoke. Lily lay curled in her bed, hugging her stuffed bear, hair spread across the pillow. She coughed once in her sleep, a small, weak sound. Lily! Noah rushed to her, shaking her shoulder. Wake up! We have to go! She blinked, eyes glassy. Noe? She croaked. What's… Get up, come on, we gotta go. There's a fire. The words sounded surreal even as he said them. Bear jumped onto the bed without waiting for permission, nudging Lily with his nose, licking her face until her sleepy confusion sharpened into fear. The house? She asked, alarmed. Yes. We need to get out. Stay low. Noah grabbed a hoodie from the floor and yanked it over her head. Come on. He pulled the blanket off and wrapped it around her shoulders, then crouched down. Climb on. She hesitated. You can't carry me. Do it, he said, more harshly than he intended, then softened. Please, Lily. The smoke's worse up there. You're smaller, you'll breathe it faster. Just trust me. She scrambled onto his back, arms around his neck, legs clinging around his waist. He bent low, almost crawling. Bear moved beside them, body pressed against Noah's leg, like a barrier. The hallway was a tunnel of gray. The air burned Noah's lungs. He could feel heat licking down the walls now. The smoke thinned for a moment near the floor, then thickened again as they reached the living room. Flames were visible through the doorway to the kitchen, bright, hungry, climbing the cabinets with greedy fingers. The front door was ahead, but between them and it, the ceiling above the living room had begun to sag, blackened and moaning. Think, Noah coughed, eyes streaming. Back door. He tried to picture the layout of the house from above, like one of his doodled floor plans. Back door in the kitchen, no, blocked. Windows in bedrooms. The big window by the dining table. Bear barked, a sharp command to move now. The dining room window, Noah rasped. To the side yard. Come on. They veered right. The dining room was a haze of gray and glowing embers from fallen curtains. The window was half open, but the frame was stuck. Noah put Lily down gently, coughing violently now, vision tunneling. Stay low, he choked out. Don't stand up. He grabbed a chair and slammed it into the window. The glass spiderwebbed, then shattered outward with a burst of cold night air and glittering shards. Smoke billowed out eagerly, rushing to escape. Go, Lil, he gasped. Climb out. I'm right behind you. She shook her head, tears mixing with soot. You first. I'm bigger, he said, pushing her forward. You can't just go. Bear intervened. He nudged Lily toward the broken frame, then, seeing her hesitate, stepped up himself. With surprising agility for his age, he pushed his front paws onto the windowsill and squeezed his body through the opening, landing on the grass outside. He turned back immediately, front paws braced on the sill, eyes blazing. Lily took a breath that felt like swallowing knives and scrambled after him, Bear's presence like a magnet pulling her through. She tumbled onto the grass beside him and coughed, sobbing. Bear licked her face once, then spun back to the window. Inside, Noah's silhouette was dim behind the remaining smoke. He staggered toward the window, one hand outstretched. Just as he reached it, there was a cracking sound overhead, a beam giving up. Part of the ceiling collapsed in the living room, sending sparks and a wave of heat down the hall. "Noah!" Lily screamed. Bear barked furiously, lunging up, trying to grab onto Noah's sleeve with his teeth like he had done when waking him. Noah scrambled, hauled himself onto the sill, using every last bit of strength left in his burning lungs and shaking limbs. Bear grabbed him, not his sleeve but the back of his hoodie, and pulled, muscles straining, paws digging into the grass for leverage. For a second, Noah thought he might slip back. Then he felt the combined force of Bear and gravity, and pure stubborn will haul him through the frame. He crashed onto the lawn, coughing so hard he saw stars. Lily threw herself over him, crying, "You're okay, you're okay." Bear collapsed beside them, sides heaving. His fur was singed along one flank. His paws were blackened from the hot floor. He coughed, a strange, choking sound for a dog, then tried to stand again, scanning the house with wild eyes as if checking for anyone else still inside. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in. Neighbors appeared with flashlights and phones and blankets. Someone shouted directions. Someone else ran to the street to flag down the fire truck. Within minutes, the yard was full of red and blue lights. Firefighters swarmed the scene, hoses uncoiling, shouting practiced commands over the roar. A paramedic knelt beside Noah and Lily, checking pulses, shining a light in their eyes. "Any adults inside?" he asked urgently. "My mom's at work," Noah croaked. "It was just us." Bear took a step, then his legs buckled. He went down hard on his side. "Hey, hey, the dog!" Lily cried. Another paramedic rushed over, gently rolling Bear onto a blanket. "We've got a K9 here," he called to his partner, though Bear had never worn a badge. "Smoke inhalation. Let's get oxygen on him." They placed a small clear mask over Bear's muzzle. He struggled weakly at first, then stilled, eyes fluttering between open and closed. His gaze searched, found Noah, and stayed there. Emily arrived 5 minutes later, sprinting from the car, shoes flapping, apron still on, face ashen. She nearly dropped to her knees when she saw her kids alive, wrapped in blankets, soot-streaked but breathing. She hugged them both until they wheezed in protest. "I got a call," she choked out. Oh my God. Oh my God. "We're okay," Noah said, though he wasn't sure if that was fully true yet. He pulled back, gripping her arms. "Mom! Bear!" She turned and saw him then, lying on the blanket, paramedics working gently over him. The oxygen mask fogged with each shallow breath. His chest rose and fell in uneven waves. "Oh no," she whispered. "No, no, no." They moved him carefully to the back of an ambulance, not to take him away like a person, but to monitor him, to give him a chance. Someone pulled animal oxygen masks from a kit, a thing the town had purchased after a fundraiser years back for pet emergencies. No one had imagined they'd use them like this. Time blurred after that. Flames obeyed the logic of fuel and wind and water until there was nothing left to burn. The little blue house that had held so much of their lives went from structure to skeleton to smoking outline. The neighbors stayed, offering spare bedrooms, coffee, silent hugs. Dawn crept up along the edge of the world, painting the sky a fragile pale pink as if the night hadn't just tried to kill them. At some point, a vet tech from the local clinic arrived, drawn by the calls about a dog. She checked Bear carefully, listening to his lungs, examining his paws, shifting his legs with practiced hand. He's old, she murmured. And he took in a lot of smoke. But his heart, she placed a hand over his chest. His heart strong. If he was younger, I'd say no question. As it is, she glanced at Noah and Emily and Lily watching with held breaths. As it is, we'll do everything we can. Can we go with him? Noah asked. She nodded. We'll make room. Hours later, at the small animal clinic on the other side of town, Bear lay in a crate with soft blankets, and 4 taped gently to his leg, oxygen still flowing. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and hope. Noah sat on the floor outside the crate, knees drawn up, chin resting on them. Lily leaned against his shoulder. Emily sat on a plastic chair nearby, hands twisted in her lap. Do you remember, Noah said hoarsely, the first time we saw him at the shelter? Emily nodded, eyes wet. You just sat in the kennel and waited. You refused to leave without hugging him. He looked like he'd already decided nobody would ever pick him, Noah whispered. And I just felt like I knew how that felt. Lily looked up at her brother. He saved us, she said simply. Yeah, Noah said. He did. They sat in silence, broken only by the soft beeping of machines and the distant murmur of the staff moving through their routines. After what felt like both minutes and years, the vet, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and gentle hands, came out of the back. He's stable, she said. For now. The smoke did some damage, but he's fighting. He's stubborn. He always has been. Emily managed a small smile. You can see him, the vet added. One at a time. Keep it calm, okay? Lily went first, small and resolute. She stepped into the room and approached the crate. Bear's eyes opened slightly at the sound of her voice. She slipped her fingers through the bars and felt the faint brush of his nose. Hey, fancy boy, she whispered, because she had given him that nickname once when he wore a ridiculous bandana and it had stuck in her heart. Thank you for getting me out. You were really brave. I'm gonna draw you with a superhero cape when we get our stuff back. Okay, we probably won't get our stuff back. I'll borrow crayons. His tail moved once, a ghost of a wag. When it was Noah's turn, he stepped in and closed the door behind him softly. The room felt suddenly smaller. He lowered himself onto his knees by the crate, hands resting on the bars. Bear looked at him, really looked at him, eyes clearer for a moment. Hey buddy, Noah said, voice rough. You remember the shelter? He laughed, a short, broken sound. Of course you do. You remember everything. He swallowed. Tears burned his eyes, but he blinked them back for a moment longer. That day, I thought I was saving you. I thought, here's this dog nobody wants, and I know what that feels like, and maybe if I hug him, it'll fix something. He shook his head, the truth settling in his chest, heavy and bright. But you were saving me, weren't you? The whole time. You were waiting. To do exactly what you did tonight. Bear's eyes shimmered with a reflection of something that wasn't quite the fluorescent light overhead. He pushed his muzzle forward, pressing it against Noah's fingers where they curled through the bars. Noah moved one hand inside and cupped Bear's face, feeling the familiar scratchy fur, the warmth.